Please give a warm welcome to Ashu Garg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I'm really excited to be here, and so thank you, Bonnie and Christine, for having me. You have a great lineup of speakers who are going to talk to you about data-driven insights, about ABM, about how AI and ML are changing the world of marketing. I'm going to take a step back today and talk a little bit about the broader transformation that's underway in marketing and why I believe that this is truly the decade of the CMO. But first, like any good marketer, I've got to start with my infomercial. So let me tell you a little bit about Foundation Capital. We're a 27-year-old venture capital firm. Over the last 25+ years, we've had a rich history of investing in MarTech companies going back to Responses. Over the last 25 years, we've created over $3.5 billion of value in the space, and we continue to be very active investors in a variety of companies. I could brag about these companies all day long, but suffice to say, I think we have a great portfolio, and a lot of the insights that I have are coming from the experiences we've had over the years with these companies. So first of all, if you look at the history of technology, in every decade, you can characterize the decade in terms of the key executive in the C-suite that has really driven the CEO's agenda and therefore driven IT spend. In the 80s, that was really the CFO. The 90s was the decade of the VPs of sales. The 2000s, it was really about CIOs who were driving consolidation in IT spend. This, I believe, is the decade of the CMO. And there's lots of data and both anecdotal evidence to support this. A couple of years ago, Gartner did a survey when they asked CEOs, what are the most important technology-enabled initiatives on your agenda? What do you think is going to drive value and growth of the corporation? And they came back with a list of 5. And the top 3 were digital marketing, customer experience management, and integrating technology and IT. Really, if you think about these 3 things, the role of the CMO is in the center stage of that transformation. More broadly, if you look at data coming back from other surveys, it shows that when CEOs look to their executive team and ask, who's going to drive my IT spend, who's going to drive the digital transformation, they look to CMOs as often as they look to CIOs or any other executive in the C-suite. And so the question is, what does this mean and why is this happening? I think for me, what does this mean? It really does mean that we're going to see an explosion in the growth of the role of technology across all of marketing. We believe that technology spending by CMOs will grow tenfold over the next decade, and that on an average, we'll be spending over $100 billion a year on technology. And by the end of this decade, technology spend by CMOs will actually exceed technology spend by CIOs. And I can walk through these numbers in a lot of detail, but before we do that, let's take a step back and look at what are the changes in buyer behavior that are driving this opportunity. Buyer behavior has really changed over the last 4 to 5 years. And I'll walk through some of the specific changes. And most of these are things that each of us as consumers experiences every day, and all of you as marketers think about in various aspects of your day-to-day jobs. At the same time, I think most of us underestimate the tectonic shifts that are taking place. And let me illustrate that with a couple of anecdotes. How many of you know that chewing gum, just literally chewing gum stick sales, fell drastically in the last 3 years? Did folks know that? Does anyone know why? Your phone. Think about where are chewing gum sticks sold? At the checkout aisle. What do we all do at the checkout aisle these days? We're looking at our phone, we walk along. There's been a 30% decline in chewing gum sales. This is a category that's grown at 1 or 2% for 100 years. And it's essentially collapsed because of the cell phone. Another anecdote. A couple of years ago, Variety magazine did a survey of American teenagers asking them, who are the most important celebrities in your life? who do you look up to? Who do you think of as celebrities? Anyone have any idea who was first in that list? Any ideas? The #1 celebrity in the United States. I wish that were true. Smosh. Smosh is a YouTube group. I'd never heard of them until I read that survey. #2 was the Fine Brothers. And #3 was PewDiePie. No one that most people in this room would think of as a celebrity even featured on the list. And I think that is the fundamental extent of the change that is underway. And we see it in bits and pieces, and we'll see it in some of these changes, but the shift is truly tectonic. And so what are the 4 dimensions of the change as I see it? The first is really about the notion that there's been an explosion both in media choices as well as in the number of channels and devices that we all engage with. 10 years ago, I watched TV, and I listened to the news on the radio. And I'd listen to music probably most probably on the radio. Today, what do? We're looking at Hulu, YouTube, Netflix, Tubi TV. We get our news from Twitter or some app like Flipboard. We listen to music on Pandora or a variety of other channels. This fragmentation has fundamentally changed how consumers interact with media and therefore with brands and marketers. The second major shift is what I call the shift from dictation to conversation. Consumers have changed how they expect us as brands and marketers to talk to them and the nature of the relationship and the power dynamics in that relationship. In the past, when I had a bad experience with United Airlines, I'd call 1-800-United Airlines, probably never get a response. I might try and complain to some government regulator, the Small Business Bureau, whoever. We don't do that anymore. We tweet, we post it on Facebook, we blog about it. We create an outsized voice for ourselves in that conversation. And that outsized voice, which every now and then does go viral, has really changed the power dynamics. And it has changed the role that us as individuals, but more broadly, all buyers have in the conversation with marketers. The third major change is the shift from just right brain to left and right brain. In the past, I would buy Rogaine simply because they said, hey, you're going to get a better head of hair. Today, even when I buy a product like Rogaine, it's not enough for them to appeal to my vanity. I want their citing scientific evidence of the clinical trials they have done that correlate use of Rogaine to hair growth. So even in a product that is as emotional as that, we're now starting to have the desire for the brands and marketers to appeal to both our emotional and our informational needs. And that's a shift that's happening across product categories, and obviously more so in B2B categories in which many of you play. The fourth major shift is the shift in the purchase funnel. It's the fundamental way the consumers make purchase decisions has changed. And social media has driven a lot of that. And I'll use myself as an example. 10 years ago, if I wanted to buy a new car, I would have probably looked at ads on TV. And those ads would have really influenced the choice I made. I may have gone to the classifieds. I would have probably gone to a dealership, done a couple of test drives, got into a negotiation. We don't do that anymore. I just bought a car, actually, recently. I posted a question in Quora and on Facebook. Here's what I'm looking to do with my car. I got a bunch of responses. I took that short list, did a bunch of research in Kelley Blue Book, posted a bunch of questions again on Facebook, and then I bought the car online through an online car buying site. The brand, Audi in this case, never had the opportunity to interact with me and influence my decision. And so that's the shift that all of us are making. In fact, there's data to show that in many cases, almost 80% of consumers make their purchase decision before they have any interaction with a brand or any brand-owned channel of communication. All of these changes in technology, all of these changes in buyer behavior are driving this fundamental shift in the role that software and technology will play in marketing. It will lead to what I believe is a tenfold growth in the spend across technology for marketing, and more broadly, in the role that technology plays in what each of you do in your daily lives. How many people here know how to code? So I see a bunch of folks in the back there. Who else knows how to code? Who knows how to do SQL queries? So at least we have a third of the room now. I believe if you do not know how to code, you have no business being in marketing. You truly don't. You truly don't. I mean, the CMO of tomorrow is the data nerd of today. Marketing is a technical discipline, and that is the fundamental nature of this shift that all of us, and I'm going back and learning C# programming again so I can create iPhone apps. All of us need to go back and make that a part of what we do. I think the challenge, though, I mean, stepping away from specifics coding, is the challenge in this technology transformation is that we're all bombarded by a myriad of technologies. I mean, if any of you have seen the Lumascape, you know that there's now 5,000 companies selling MarTech solutions. And you probably get a dozen of those emails every day. And so the question is, how do you think about the framework for yourselves on what matters? And how do you set up a roadmap or a staircase of capabilities that you try to build over time? And I have what I call the 6 keys framework to help you think through that. There really are sort of 6 pillars, and you may do some of these things in sequence depending on what you're doing or in parallel, but these are the 6 broad themes around which I believe a CMO or a senior marketing executive should build their technology strategy. I'll walk you through a few of these in some detail, but let me start with one that I think is most appropriate here, which is, ROI is king. This isn't a new idea. I mean, for as long as we've had marketers and CMOs, the notion of the fact that we need solutions that will help us estimate the return on spend on marketing investment has been true. I think what has changed is the fundamental nature of expectations that CEOs and CFOs have of their marketers. They expect us as marketers to live in a world where we understand the ROI, not just for marketing in aggregate, but for every channel, for every communication, for every interaction we have with customers, and to understand the role that every interaction plays in the overall picture in the customer journey that we talked about. And a journey that, as we said earlier, is fragmenting by the day. So given that this is an obvious thing to do, given that we know our CEOs want that, why has this been so hard? It's a really, really hard problem. And it really boils down to the fact that you have a very complex purchase path. I mean, I'll take myself as an example again. I bought a pair of shoes for my son last week. I started by seeing some sort of ad on YouTube as I was watching something. I saw an ad for Nike shoes. I immediately started Googling Nike shoes. I saw a couple of options. Again, my favorite thing is to post questions on Facebook and Quora. I posted a couple of questions, got some information, and eventually I just drove up to a store and bought the shoes. How does Nike connect the individual pair of shoes I bought at a physical store in Redwood City with all of those interactions that I did over the last 3 or 4 days? But that's a challenge you all face in your jobs day to day. I mean, I use a personal example. It's not very different, and it really boils down to figuring out how do you aggregate that data in a way that it can actually be managed, processed, and you can draw insights. You have to deal with device fragmentation. You have to bridge the gap between online and offline experiences. And while this is hard, and the data is messy, and the challenges are real, doing so lies at the bedrock of building the digital transformation in your organizations. The second major pillar is around the notion that all media will be bought and sold programmatically. Again, it's a shift that we have seen happen. I suspect many of you are buying ads on Facebook. Some of you may be buying ads on Snapchat. Some may be buying display across some sort of ad exchange. But in aggregate, less than a quarter of all media is bought and sold digitally today. And over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, that's going to change fundamentally. All media, whether it's the billboards that we see on 101, or TV ads, or email ads, all of these will be bought and sold programmatically. Now, why is this not happen? It hasn't happened because there are practical challenges. There are challenges, I mean, if you were to place an ad, and this may be less relevant for folks in this audience, but if you're a consumer brand, if you place an ad on any online newspaper or sort of CNN.com, there is no way even today to guarantee that your ad isn't going to show up next to an ISIS story. If I'm Procter & Gamble or Unilever, you care a lot about that. So brand context and brand safety is still a challenge online, but those issues will get resolved. I also think it's a challenge because of the nature of the partners we work with. The agencies, the vendors, very often lack the skills to make this transformation. But again, all of those are, I think, issues that are changing, and you will see by the end of this decade, most media being bought and sold programmatically. The third, and this is, I think, a really important pillar in the context of this audience, if you want to engage in a dialogue with consumers who are on this random journey that I talked about earlier in the section around buyer behavior transformation, you have to engage with them in the context that they wish to do so. So you're all probably building content for your website, you're building custom content for YouTube, you're tweeting, you know, some of you may have started or will start building content for Snapchat. Like, there's this myriad of channels. And if you do this well, you can truly build advocates. You can build what I call a friend, philosopher, guide-like relationship with your customers. But that's hard. I mean, think about even a brand as big as Dove. And Dove has been doing this for a decade. They've got to build unique content for each of these channels. They've got to find ways to sort of first distribute and then amplify the content. They have to track what works where. And before you know it, you have this massive complexity of both content creation and then content tracking and analytics. But it's the reality that we live in. I think fundamentally, as a marketer, you have to turn your world around and think about the heart of your business being a newsroom. Every brand is a publisher. And at the center of your team and your organization has to lie the newsroom that creates this content, which you can then distribute across the myriad of channels that exist today, and that will change over time. How many of you saw the movie Minority Report? I don't know if you remember Tom Cruise as he walked through the mall. The ads would change around him. I think that is the future. On those infinite paths to purchase, consumers today, and this is whether it's B2B buyers or B2C buyers, customers expect that they will truly get a customized journey across those infinite paths to purchase. And we, as marketers, have to combine both implicit and explicit data sets and to be able to act on them in real time so that we can deliver on that expectation of a unique experience at every step on that journey. And I think you all know that. It's a hard problem to solve. Personalization is probably the largest of big data problems there is. It's expensive. There's issues around privacy, around data protection. There's lots of challenges when you're combining online and offline experiences. But that is the future. And in order to do that well, we're going to have to start to think through how do you, again, go back to connecting the content across these myriad of channels with the data we know about that individual consumer. I mean, this concept of closing the deal is one that's probably very near and dear to folks in this room. I believe that the notion that marketers generate leads and then pass the baton on to sales to close the deal is an antiquated concept. If you think about freemium software, and I think most of us have used Dropbox or some other product like that, it's really a marketing-driven process. Marketers identify the customer, marketers get customers to download the product, to try it out, and at some point, when customers have created value for themselves through the product, you have salespeople that are order takers. Well, I believe that's the future of all sales. And I think all of you have the opportunity to convert the salespeople in your organizations into order takers. But that requires you to change how you think about your roles. but how you think about nurturing the relationships, how you think about taking them from awareness all the way to actually using the products. But as marketers begin to do that across product categories, I believe that sales will no longer be exclusively the job of sales, and that marketers will be responsible for really owning most of that life cycle all the way to the point where an order needs to be taken. And like personalization, from a technology standpoint, it's really a big data problem that requires a lot of hard issues around data privacy and protection. In particular, in this case, because you have PII. You can do personalization without PII, but if you're going to go all the way down to actually having people use the product, the PII issues become even more important. So those are really the 5 keys that I had initially come up with. But over the last year or so, I've really become convinced that the role of television in marketing is going to change. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of TV. And today, as I talked about earlier, we look at YouTube, Netflix, Tubi TV, and a variety of other such sources. And increasingly, we're beginning to think about how to use AR and VR in the worlds that we live in. Now, today, this is mostly a consumer phenomenon. And so most B2B companies don't think about online video or VR or AR as a core part of their marketing strategy. And that's largely true. I think that, to be fair, that's largely true today. But I do think that will change. In particular, the role of VR and AR, I think, will transform how you can create unique experiences, and using AR in particular, unique experiences that combine the physical and the online worlds in a way that drive unique customer experiences. So really, those are the keys that I believe are the pillars behind the technology infrastructure that all of you will build. And it's never been a more exciting time to be a marketer. I mean, in this digital transformation that's underway, I think all of us as marketers have the opportunity to eventually become CEOs. And I think of it as first as CMOs moving to be chief experience officers, CEOs with a little e is what I call it, and eventually for CMOs to take the mantle of CEOs. Because transforming that customer experience lies at the center of growth and innovation for most organizations. And so I think, it's a great time to be here. And for those of you who are aspiring CMOs, it's a great time to be on that journey. And if anyone of you is thinking of starting a company in the MarTech space, well, you can always still dial 1-800-ASHU-GARG. Thank you very much, and have a great day.